The book I want to introduce to you today is called The Rabble, subtitled Mass Psychology Research. This book is known as the pioneering work of group psychology research, has been translated into more than 20 languages, and is popular all over the world. Author Gustave Le Bon. It was more than 100 years ago. French social psychologist. Le Bon in 1866 received his MD degree. 4 years later, he began practicing medicine in Paris. Like many scholars of that era, Le Bon is an interdisciplinary generalist. His research interests span anthropology, natural sciences and social psychology. Let's look back more than 100 years later. But he found out that he was in social psychology, and achievements in the field of mass communication, far higher than his medical achievements. The main reason lies in the book Rabble. The word rabble. In Chinese, it has a derogatory meaning. In fact, its English translation is, it means a group. It's actually a neutral word. In the book, Le Bon tells why groups appear. What are the factors? Causes individuals to join groups and become crazy, impulsive, and irrational. In the end, in an overwhelming way, changed our society. Le Bon makes many arguments in this book. For us today, we understand that many current social phenomena and social events are of great reference value. Let's get into the book now. See how Le Bon portrays the overwhelming rabble. The whole book Rabble is divided into 3 volumes. We need to really understand the book. The focus must be on the definition, characteristics, and reasons for the formation of rabble. Specifically, I will use the following 4 questions to help you understand what this book is about. 1. What exactly does rabble mean? What is the reason for the formation of the rabble? 3. How leaders play a role in a rabble. How do we evaluate the book Rabble? The first question. What exactly does a rabble mean? First of all, let's take a look at Le Bon's definition of rabble. Le Bon defined a rabble, that is, the group. It has several characteristics. They were an unorganized group. People who have nothing to do with each other. These people are because of an event or a certain opportunity. There is a common point psychologically, and thus gathered. When describing the definition of a group, 1,000 people who gathered in public places by chance. There is no clear goal. In a psychological sense, it cannot be counted as a group at all, according to the definition of Le Bon. At the same time, a group of people gathered in the same space. For example, tourists in scenic spots, consumers in shopping malls, people walking by the lake. None of this is a rabble. But if suddenly there is an explosion, this group of people is afraid of it, began to flee frantically. The psychology of escape. It gives these people psychological commonalities. They also constitute one. Groups in the psychological sense. That's what Le Bon said. The other way around. Some groups, for example the military enterprises, religious groups, etc. It is not a rabble. Because they are organized, able to accept command. What are the psychological characteristics of the rabble? A group of people who have nothing to do with each other. Suddenly it became a rabble. It's because of their psychology. There are some commonalities. What do they have in common? We can summarize the following points. Consider it in terms of quantity. Individuals who form groups. You will feel an unstoppable force. Made him dare to vent his instinctive desires. Suddenly there was an explosion. Everyone will start fleeing. Face danger. Escape is an instinct. And destruction. Sympathize. All belong to the category of instinct. In some parades, the phenomenon of smashing, looting, and burning is very common. It is the instinct of destruction at work. Photos of children facing the aftermath of a terrorist attack. Many people donated. It is also the instinct of sympathy. Between group members. Every feeling and action. When you see someone else running, you must also hurry up. This is the contagion of group action. For most people, There was no time to think. Unless it's an agent, special forces and other trained people. Only then can we take some time. Observe the terrain of the crowd. Decide how to run. The group is very receptive to cues, because there is a hidden aura in the group. Some may not have witnessed the explosion, but seeing everyone start running, I also feel that something big has happened. Poor group reasoning ability. Intelligence is low. Moreover, individual IQ is easily weakened by the group. Judgment will also decline. A person with a high IQ joins the group. It will eventually be pulled to a very low level. After the individual joins the group, the ability to rationality declined rapidly. How exactly does this process happen? Le Bon did not give a very clear statement. Here is a comprehensive interpretation of mine. Each of us has our own emotional frequency. When we base ourselves on some kind of fear, beliefs or goals join a group. Then the emotional frequency of the individual. It will be paired with the emotional frequency of the group. Some people need to turn up the frequency. Some people need to turn down the frequency. Everyone needs to tune in to the same frequency. Eventually form emotional resonance. Under emotional resonance, individuals will give up their own independent thinking. Instead, they push themselves to keep pace with the group. Nor is it necessarily associated with negative events. For example, facing a child who has fallen into the water. The crowd present, they have entered a mental mode of saving people. Those who are usually more indifferent. It can also be transmitted in groups. Become very enthusiastic. Some critically ill patients. Honorific. Write a story. Post it online. It can win the support of the majority of netizens. Greetings and donations. These donors. In a sense, it is also a rabble defined by Le Bon. The above is the first part of this book. Let's briefly summarize that the rabble in Le Bon's writing is not a simple group of people gathered, but a group of people with common feelings and common concepts. These people are not like military soldiers, enterprise employees, have undergone rigorous training, can act in unison within the rabble. A single person may have a high IQ, be very rational, but once gathered, they become intellectually retarded, easy to suggest, impulsive, paranoid, easy to exaggerate, etc. A group of people with such characteristics can cause great destruction or create great achievements. What is the reason for the formation of the rabble? Many major events in history have been facilitated by social movements in which rabble members participate. The most typical is the French Revolution, and there are many such events in Chinese history, such as the Boxer Rebellion that we are familiar with, and some student movements. These rabble of such a large scale. How exactly is it formed? What factors led to their appearance? It can be divided into direct and indirect factors. But in fact, from the whole book, the emergence of a rabble is also closely related to the leader. Probably the role of the leader is particularly large. So he devoted a chapter to discuss. We will talk about the role of leaders separately. Rabble and social movements. Or social unrest occurs at the same time. Big events are caused by skirmishes. It is what we call the fuse. For example, the fuse of the outbreak of the French Revolution. It is a tax collection meeting. The king was arrogant at the meeting, trying to make a third grade. That is, the bourgeoisie imposes more taxes. As soon as the meeting ended, the dissatisfied masses began to discuss. It's time to get into action. But it's okay for the masses to be dissatisfied. It's okay to be stupid. They also need someone to tug at their heartstrings. The reason why the masses were able to join the movement, join the revolution, willing to be a ragtag group of MPs. There are three direct factors. The first direct factor are those concepts that circulate during the outbreak of the movement. Vocabulary. These concepts may seem very vivid, but their meaning must be ambiguous. When the speaker speaks, These conceptual vocabulary, even clichés, are very inflammatory. Before the outbreak of the French Revolution, freedom, equality, fraternity. These are some of these concepts. These three words are abstract, but it can hit people's hearts. Let a lot of ordinary people. The second direct reason. It is an illusion that appears in the process of collective action. Since the emergence of civilization, the group has been under the influence of hallucinations. Friends who have read or heard a brief history of humanity maybe remember. Author of the book, Yuval Harari, thinks the ability to make fiction is an important point that distinguishes humans from animals. Le Bon and Harari said something similar. People are hallucinating, have the ability to fictionalize some goals and scenarios, and in the crowd, human hallucinations will appear more easily. The reason why some people seem rational will also join the movement, because they also hallucinate. Immerse yourself in the movement of the choral tsunami. They also feel unstoppable. I feel that the victory of the revolution is ahead. The third direct factor. It is the historical experience of the group. Group experience can be seen as, it is a collective memory. Before the outbreak of the French Revolution, the king raised taxes on the Third Estate through Parliament. Not the first time. In the spring of the previous year, 1789, French farmers experienced a severe drought. In the summer, another hailstorm came, smashed the crops. The government has not been able to provide timely disaster relief. These are the common life experiences of the French at that time. Make them easily dissatisfied. Indirect factors are also key to the formation of the rabble. The first of the indirect factors is race. Because Le Bon is a typical racist. So he thinks race is a very fundamental point. Race determines the temperament of a group of people. The French are just extra impulsive. A people who are susceptible to bewitchment. And the British next door. Rational and calm. Not as paranoid as the French. It is easy to be hinted at. The same regime change was carried out. The British made a glorious revolution. The French captured the Bastille. Emperor Louis XVI was sent to the guillotine. So when he was writing this book, generally give historical routines. It's all about France. How good is Britain? The second indirect factor. It is a traditional factor. Le Bon said, tradition is the product of a combination of races. Le Bon is a bit like China's Lu Xun. Different countries. People of different ethnicities. It has its own characteristics. Temperamental. Lu Xun criticized the Chinese. What about Le Bon? Also criticized French social traditions. Too aggressive. The third indirect factor is time. Le Bon said time. It's actually another dimension, because tradition is included. Political system. And education. It must rely on the accumulation of time. No matter how good people are, we need to accomplish one thing. Takes time. The specific concept of the inner world of the masses has been implemented. It also takes the blessing of time. The revolution is about to break out. Emotions should be accumulated. Energy should be reserved. Time is of the essence. The fourth indirect factor. It is a political and social system. Le Bon felt. Political and social systems. For people to join the revolutionary ranks. Of course it has a certain impact. Even in specific discussions. The music side is cold. Began to envy the British or Americans. By the way, reproach. France, Spain and other Latin peoples. Le Bon believes. Democracy is also implemented. The United States is highly prosperous. And Argentina, which was colonized by Spain. Chile, Bolivia. But it was tragic and chaotic. The last indirect factor is education. In the role of education, Le Bon also continues to surround it. Racial issues are criticized. Education in France. In fact, it is to put the educated people become an enemy of society. Race is a central factor. Other factors also play a role around race. The above is the second part of this book. Let's summarize briefly. From Lupin's analysis box. The reason why a person joins the rabble. It can be divided into two reasons, direct and indirect. The direct cause is, he witnessed or heard the outbreak of the incident. Then I was persuaded by some rhetorical concepts. Meantime, in the wave of movement, they believed, our group is very powerful. He shares memories and experiences with this group. Prompted him to join the large army. Indirect factors are also indispensable. It's just that when they are functioning, it's more like diving into the night with the wind. Ethnic traditions, time system, and education are all indirect factors. How leaders play a role in a rabble. As long as there are some creatures gathered, whether it's an animal or a person, will instinctively put themselves in one, under the rule of the leader. So, the role of leaders in the rabble, and their psychological impact on the rabble, we have to talk about it separately. First, let's look at the classification of leaders. In the rabble, Le Bon divides leaders into two categories. One kind, he is a person with a strong will for a while. That is temporary. Temporary leader. Like what? Pioneer in fan riots. Or diving to save people. See the volunteers. They were just doing that. Become a leader. Another category is a leader with more lasting willpower. They occupy the main position for a long time. The effects after death may be greater than before death. What about this kind of leader? We can see it often through the medium. Founding fathers of a nation. Legendary merchant. And the great thinker. The two types of leaders are very different. But I can still provide another case. Helps to understand. In Jin Yong's novel, Heaven and Dragon Slayer, Zhang Wuji is the interim leader. And his successor Zhu Yuanzhang belongs to the long-term leader. Although Zhang Wuji's kung fu is unfathomable, but weak character, I have been pushed away by the people around me. And what about Zhu Yuanzhang? Although his martial arts were mediocre, has willpower that others cannot match. Let's look at the methods of leadership. Let's take a look at the leader. In the process of becoming a leader, what means are needed? Le Bon's answer is 3 words. Assertions are leaders. Don't make any arguments. Don't have any reasoning. Only firm underground judgment. Only then can the masses believe it. Earlier we gave the example of an explosion. In fact, it doesn't matter if there is an explosion or not. Or is it a balloon explosion? Interim leaders present, if you want everyone to believe, will definitely shout firmly. Exploded, exploded. What about this person? I will never argue with you. How to identify terrorist attacks? How large is it to explode? Why is the current situation an explosion? As for those who have been in leadership positions for a long time, their speech spoke. It is more determined. There is only a firm tone. Can make the audience in the audience feel normal and comfortable. Reasoning and argumentation. I can't overcome some words and clichés. They were grandly listed with the group. Just hear them. Everyone will be in awe. Those big clichés. It always sounds inspiring. High spirits. A lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. The leader's words are repeated 10,000 times. Those who have the ability to think independently. Hallucinations can also occur. The man who shouted in the explosion. It will definitely not just shout once, 3 or 5 times. This constant repetition. It is more likely to cause the fluctuation of people's hearts. Extremely important rhetoric. There is only one. Napoleon was an expert in agitation. He is a well-deserved leader. His importance for repeating a concept. It was clear in my heart. One last point. No matter how ridiculous the assertion, as long as the leader is steadfast, repeat constantly, it can spread widely. In 2011, after the Fukushima nuclear leak in Japan was exposed, a large number of ordinary residents of the southeast coast began to grab salt. The reason is that some people say that salt can protect against radiation. It will make people disregard. As the saying goes, rumors stop at the wise. But if everyone in the group panics, there is no such thing as a wise man. Utilize salt-breaking repeat and contagion. Leaders can gain a tremendous amount of power. This kind of power is Mingwang. It is a continuous cyclical process. With the leader of Mingwang, continue to break the salt and repeat it. Then the leader's reputation will continue to expand. And the leader's reputation will also pass through public opinion. Literature and art are embodied. We will find society as a whole, the cult of this kind of leader, very similar to a religious spirit. The above is the third part of this book. Again, let's summarize. Leaders are divided into short-term, interim leader, and long-term, permanent leader. These two categories. The former category, it just emerged in a special scene. Once the scene disappears, they will be submerged in the masses again. The other type of leader has a strong will. It can always occupy an important position, make an important impact, and be a leader. It is necessary to follow the mantra of the 6 sons. Leaders must be one. Only those who break the south wall in the end can. It can bring him greater fame. This will help the leadership influence last. It is also a very important question. It's how we should look at this book. A very controversial book. The Rabble. After all, it has been published for 122 years. Many scholars, or follow the research path of Le Bon, or cut in from other fields, all join the team of group psychology research. When we are interpreting the Rabble, best experienced, looking up there are 3 stages, head up and down. It is we who must have deep respect. Go and look up at this one. Social psychology 100 years ago. The second stage. It is we who want to enter the text, with a head-to-head attitude, to find out its argument. We want to see it the way a bird sees. Examine Le Bon's views. The outsole position in the entire ideological context. It's a way to look down. As only we know Le Bon's position in the entire concept market. Only then can we make a better critical interpretation. Wang Yongming's book. Knowledge and action are unified. We only have one theory. Conduct critical interpretations. Only then can theory be linked to practice. So, next we try. Take a bird's-eye view of Le Bon's thoughts. Morton, a famous American social theorist, gave a very pertinent evaluation. Contemporary significance in the Rabble lies in his ability to find problems, rather than a problem-solving function. Le Bon is a sharp-eyed asserter. His judgment was very accurate. The psychological characteristics of the masses he presented. It is also very thought-provoking, especially in today's era. Network information is extremely fragmented. Rumors are common. We may be some. Exaggerated products are bewitched. May also be unconsciously led by the remarks of a certain big V. The rabble is simply everywhere. The threshold to becoming a rabble is too low. It has been well confirmed. Interestingly, a rabble of musicians. The whole book seems to be doing 2 things. Basically, Le Bon has always emphasized, no matter how smart a single person is, once they gathered, ignited by an event, will become mentally retarded, impulsive and irritable, exaggerated behavior. And this book next to Le Bon, sells well all over the world. The step of contagion is completed. So, Le Bon looked like a leader. Through the publishing medium, always assert repetition and contagion. This theory in practice. On the book rabble, organic bonding is obtained. Le Bon is really not simple. Let's take a look at the later generation's response to the rabble. What are the supporting studies and criticisms? Le Bon's discussion on the relationship between the masses and leaders. Basically, it is an observational result. Experimental psychology is just getting started. Le Bon as an amateur social observer. There are no capabilities and conditions yet. Conduct theoretical experiments. But by 1961, assistant professor of psychology at Yale University, Stanley Milgram, made a famous one. Authority obeys experimentation. This experiment proves it. Humans have one. The nature of obeying the orders of authority. In specific scenarios, people will betray themselves. The ethics that have always been observed. Obey the orders of authority figures. To harm innocent people. We can roughly talk about this experiment. Milgram invited some good citizens and staff in the United States participate in experiments without the knowledge of the public. All of them are deliberately arranged as teachers. The staff pretended to be students. These citizens play teachers. Their task is to detect the vocabulary of students. Whenever a student answers a question incorrectly, teachers need to lay the foundation for students. The more wrong answers, the higher the voltage level. And the students played by the staff, according to the motor strength, react painfully under the majestic instructions of the experimenter. Most of the good citizens who are usually warm and kind, it is selected to use a voltage of up to 400 volts. Authority obeys experimentation. Can be said that to a certain extent, it supports Le Bon's theory. But American economist Olson, different perspectives were presented. Olson doesn't pay much attention to specific psychological conditions. What he focused on was everyone's interests. Olson's research finds many so-called masses in collective action. Not as Le Bon said, it will lose its rationality. In fact, they just put the collective action as a means of realizing individual interests. Once you have an opportunity, these masses will hitchhike. For example, in a lot of parades, some participants mixed in, probably just for a free boxed lunch. There is no strong demand in the rabble. Why can it be formed? Or social movement events. Analyze the reasons for why it appears. Le Bon said direct and indirect factors. Not perfect enough. American sociologist Smelzy. The value accumulation theory proposed. It may be more explanatory. A major difference raised by Smelzy. It is a social control factor. It is the government's ability to control the strong, infiltrate the masses. So ordinary people, it is difficult to have a chance to join the rabble. The book Rabble. The political incorrectness presented. It is also controversial. The music is in the book. He despises people of color to the fullest. Women and children. Can be said. Le Bon has a very strong race, gender and age superiority. At the beginning of the second chapter of this book, it should be noted, some characteristics of the group, such as impulsiveness, impatience, lack of rationality. There is no judgment and critical spirit. Exaggerate emotions and so on. Almost always seen in the life of the lower evolutionary form. For example, women, barbarians, and children. Afterwards, in the narrative of one, because the witness was wrongly identified. After the unjust case, he vowed to start summarizing again. This misidentification occurs. Often women and children, and the most opinionated people, judged by the current standards. Le Bon is one, proper racist, and standard straight male cancer. Considering the UK, which Le Pen highly admired. It wasn't until 1928. Only then did women be given the right to vote. And the United States until 1964. The Civil Rights Act was passed to ensure equal rights for Black people. With modern values, came to criticize Le Pen's position more than 100 years ago. Slightly powerful and fair. Let's conclude with a brief summary. The rabble of Le Pen's pen. It is not a simple gathering of a group of people. It is a group of people with a common sense of feeling. The psychological characteristics of the rabble. It is to act according to instinct. Weak reasoning ability. Susceptible to suggestion. Impulsive paranoia. Easy to exaggerate and so on. Secondly, the reason why a person joins the rabble may be influenced by some direct reasons. He witnesses or hears the outbreak of a certain event, and then is persuaded by some rhetoric and concept. Or he has a common memory and social experience with this group, and he may also be influenced by indirect factors such as race, tradition, and time. Leaders play an important role in the rabble, and they mainly rely on assertion, repetition, and contagion to become leaders. And affect the rabble. The book Rabble. That's all for you. See you tomorrow.